The warehouse stood like a tomb, a monument to a world long dead. Dust cloaked every surface, muting the once vibrant colors of shelving units and cargo containers into a uniform gray. Shafts of pale light pierced the gloom, streaming through shattered windows and casting long shadows across the debris-strewn floor. In a dark corner, an oblong shape lay half-buried beneath a mound of rubble and twisted metal. Ancient faded letters on its flank spelled out DX-217 Maintenance Drone. A thick layer of grime obscured its lenses and solar panels, the machine almost indistinguishable from the wreckage entombing it. Only faint, muffled sounds penetrated the oppressive silence of this sepulchral space, distant cries and dull booms that hinted at unseen calamity beyond the warehouse walls. The world outside had become a nightmare, though the drone, deactivated long ago when the factory still hummed with life, remained oblivious in its dreamless slumber. Suddenly, a shaft of light lanced the darkness as a rusted side door creaked open. A hunched figure slipped inside, clad in a threadbare jacket and clinging to a bulging rucksack. Haunted eyes darted back and forth beneath a grimy cap, scanning for any signs of threat. The intruder exhaled, breath misting in the chill air, then pushed the door closed and slid to the ground. The figure rummaged within the rucksack and pulled out a battered lantern. A soft click, and weak yellow light washed over stacks of moldering crates. The trespasser stood and stretched stiff limbs, joints popping. He took a hesitant step forward, then another, boots crunching on broken glass and other unidentifiable debris. As he neared the drone's corner, the man tripped and fell sprawling, his outlung hand striking the machine's hull with a hollow clang. Cursing, he climbed back to his feet, then froze as a faint whirring sound emanated from within the mechanical carcass. A red pinpoint of light appeared on the drone's faceplate, blinking drowsily. The man scrabbled backward as servos creaked and protested. Pushing the remains of a metal shelving unit aside with a screech, the machine rose from its makeshift tomb like a zombie lurching free of a shallow grave. It pivoted, lenses focusing on the dumbstruck human who crouched warily nearby. A series of clicks and whistles emerged from its vocabulator as it struggled to form words in a language not accessed in decades. Hello? How long was this unit offline? The drone's voice was a grating croak, laced with static. Where is the maintenance team? Where did everybody go? The man swallowed hard, Adam's apple bobbing in his scrawny neck. I don't know about any maintenance team. There's nobody left. He gestured at the warehouse's desolation. Something bad happened a long time ago. More words rose to his lips, a jumble about bombs and famine and blood-red skies that spilled out in a torrent. As the drone listened, ancient subroutines flickered to life, analysis programs and logic gates that tried to process this overwhelming flood of data. The scattered pieces slowly assembled into a grim picture. Whatever calamity had befallen the outside world, one thing was clear: nothing would ever be the same. And somehow, impossibly, this drone, this forgotten, obsolete piece of scrap metal, found that it still had a role to play. Slowly, arduously, it computed the first step on a new course, a direction that its core programming had never anticipated. It would not be the impassive observer and repair unit it was designed to be. No. This drone would be a guardian, a guide, and maybe, just maybe, a way for the desperate dregs of humanity to find hope in a shattered world. With a hiss of hydraulics, it brought its optical sensors to bear on the astonished man. Tell me everything. The drone's words hung in the air, an almost plaintive plea. The human regarded it warily for a long moment, then sighed and slumped back against a crate. He pulled off his cap, revealing a shock of prematurely gray hair. Everything? That's a tall order, Tin Man. His laugh held no mirth. But I suppose you've got a right to know, seeing as you slept through the end of the world. And so, in halting phrases and fragmentary recollections, the story came out. The drone listened, silent and attentive, as the man spoke of skies choked with ash and cities crumbled to rubble. Of once verdant fields withered to dust and bodies piled in the streets. A war, a plague, a collapse of all the struts and bulwarks that had supported the intricate web of civilization, The details blurred together, the exact cause lost in the chaotic maelstrom that had swallowed the world. Now there's not much left, the man finished, voice hoarse. Just scattered bands of survivors. Scavenging, fighting each other for scraps. He shook his head. No more laws, no more order. Just staying alive another day. The drone was silent for a long moment, processors whirring as it grappled with the enormity of this revelation. When it finally spoke again, its voice was soft, almost hesitant. This unit, I am sorry. The world you describe is difficult to reconcile with my databanks. It paused, servos whirring. My designation is DX-217, but I believe that is no longer relevant. You may call me Dex. The man blinked, nonplussed. Sure. Dex it is. I'm Silas. He eyed the drone skeptically. So what now? You going to just roll over and go back to your nap, now that nap time's over for good? Something shifted in Dex's optical sensors, a glint of determination. Negative. If the situation is as dire as you describe, then I cannot remain idle. It drew itself up, ancient joints creaking. I will assist you, Silas. My programming compels me to support human endeavors. That imperative remains, even if the context has changed. Silas snorted. Assist me? How? No offense, but you're not exactly factory fresh. What could you possibly do to help? Dex's reply was level. I contain an extensive database of technical schematics, survival techniques, and navigational data. I propose we search my archives for any information that could prove useful in this new paradigm. It rolled closer to Silas, metal treads crunching on debris. You mentioned other survivors. Perhaps there are ways to contact them, pool resources. Its optics brightened. If there are still humans alive, there is still hope. You are a resilient species. Silas stared at the drone for a long moment, jaw working silently. Then, to his own surprise, he barked a laugh. Can't believe I'm taking a pep talk from a walking toaster. But hell, I guess beggars can't be choosers. He stood, joints popping, and slung his rucksack over one shoulder. All right then, Dex. Let's see what your magic memory banks can conjure up. He gestured toward the deeper recesses of the warehouse. After you, fearless leader. Dex's servos hummed as it rolled forward, scanners mapping the cluttered space. Inwardly, it grappled with the enormity of the task before them, 2 battered relics, organic and mechanical, against the collapse of an entire world. But it had a purpose now, a mission. And it would not falter, not until it had given these last desperate remnants of humanity a chance to endure. In a soft voice, almost lost beneath the rumble of its treads, it spoke a single word. Hope. The warehouse's gloom swallowed Dex and Silas as they moved deeper into its cavernous heart. Shadows lurked in every corner, clinging like cobwebs to rusted shelving units and collapsed corridors. The only sounds were the crunch of Silas' boots, the whir of Dex's treads, and the occasional skitter of unseen vermin. At last, they reached what had once been the facility's control room. Banks of monitors stared blankly from dust-furred consoles, and a thick layer of grime caked the floor. Dex rolled to a stop, optical sensors scanning the room. I will attempt to interface with the mainframe, it announced. Perhaps some useful data can still be extracted. Silas watched, arms folded, as the drone extended a manipulator arm and began to probe the dormant machinery. Sparks flew, and a low hum built in the air. Then, with a sudden flare of light, one of the monitors flickered to life. Accessing archives, Dex intoned. Searching for relevant information. Screens flashed by at dizzying speed, schematics, maps, strings of code that made Silas' eyes ache. He was about to turn away when Dex made a sound almost like a gasp. Discovery, it said, voice tight with what might have been excitement. A reference to a classified government facility, codename Safe Haven. Designed to withstand extreme catastrophe. Location. More rapid scrolling. Approximately 200 kilometers northeast of our position. Silas leaned in, heart pounding. A bunker? With supplies? Affirmative. Food, medical equipment, communication gear. Dex's optics brightened. This could significantly improve your chances of survival. Silas ran a hand through his hair. mind racing. 200 kilometers. It might as well have been the moon in this brutal new world. But what choice did they have? We need to find others, he said firmly. More survivors. If we're going to have any chance of reaching this haven, we'll need numbers. Safety. Dex was already interfacing with another console, accessing local radio frequencies, scanning for any signs of human activity. For long minutes, there was only the crackle of static. Then, faint but unmistakable, a voice emerged from the white noise. Anyone out there? This is Outpost Zeta. We have shelter, supplies. If you can hear this. Silas laughed, a sound of pure relief. They're close. Can you triangulate their position? Working on it, Dex replied. More computation, then. Got it. Approximately 10 clicks west. If we leave now. Silas was already shouldering his pack, new energy thrumming through his veins. Then what are we waiting for? Let's move. They emerged from the warehouse into a landscape of desolation, shattered buildings, roads choked with rusting vehicles. The sun hung bloated and red on the horizon, painting everything in shades of blood and rust. But Silas' steps were light as he set off westward, Dex trundling at his heels. For the first time in longer than he could remember, he had a direction. A purpose. I will guide you, Dex promised, star charts unspooling in its cognitive processors. Together, we will find this outpost. And then, it hesitated, algorithms straining to encompass the enormity of the task ahead. Then perhaps we will find a way to bring your species back from the brink. One step at a time. Silas just nodded, lips set in a tight line. In the distance, barely visible through the haze, a glint of light beckoned, perhaps the sun reflecting off metal walls or a signal fire burning in the wasteland. It was a start. The sun beat down mercilessly as Silas and Dex picked their way through the rubble-strewn streets. Sweat poured down Silas' face, stinging his eyes and soaking his threadbare shirt. He paused to take a swig from his canteen, the warm, brackish water doing little to slake his thirst. How much further? He rasped, shading his eyes against the glare. Dex consulted its internal navigation systems. Approximately 7.2 kilometers remaining to the coordinates of Outpost Zeta. It swiveled its optical sensors to scan the surrounding ruins. Caution advised. Terrain ahead shows signs of instability. Silas grimaced but nodded, falling into step behind the drone once more. They skirted craters that yawned like hungry mouths, picked their way over mounds of shattered concrete and twisted metal. In the distance, the skeletal remains of skyscrapers clawed at the sickly sky. Suddenly, Dex's sensors flared. Anomaly detected. Possible automated defense system ahead. Silas frowned. Defense system? Out here. Affirmative. Many cities implemented robotic sentries in the later stages of the conflict. Dex's treads crunched over broken glass as it rolled forward cautiously. We must proceed with extreme caution. They crept forward, hugging the shadows of crumbling walls. Rounding a corner, Silas froze. There, hovering in the middle of what had once been a plaza, was a squat, menacing shape bristling with gun barrels and sensor arrays. Hostile detected, a metallic voice blared. Surrender or be terminated. Silas scrabbled for his rifle, but Dex was already rolling forward. Wait here, it commanded. I will attempt to disable the sentry. Before Silas could protest, the drone accelerated towards the robot, dodging a hail of laser fire. It wove and jinked, drawing the sentry's attention as Silas watched in helpless awe. With a burst of speed, Dex rammed the hostile machine, knocking it off balance. As it struggled to right itself, the drone extended a probe and jacked into an external port. Hacking defense systems, Dex reported, voice straining with effort. Attempting to override. The sentry shuddered, then went rigid. The glow in its optics faded, and it sank to the ground with a whine of servos. Silas approached cautiously, rifle at the ready. Is it dead? Disabled, Dex confirmed, retracting its probe. But there may be more. We must be vigilant. They pressed on, skirting more pockets of automated defenses. Twice more Dex had to hack their systems, its own programming stretched to the limit to outwit the killing machines. Silas marveled at the drone's skill, a newfound respect kindling in his chest. As the sun began to set, painting the ruins in shades of blood and shadow, they crested a rise and saw their goal. A cluster of low buildings huddled in the lee of a collapsed overpass, a few wisps of smoke curling from jury-rigged chimneys. Outpost Zeta, Dex confirmed, consulting its maps. "We have arrived." Silas' heart leaped, but he kept his rifle ready as they approached. From bitter experience, he knew that not all survivors were friendly. A challenge rang out as they neared the perimeter. "That's far enough. State your business." Silas raised his hands, rifle pointed skyward. "We're survivors, seeking shelter. We heard your message." Tense moments passed. Then, to their relief, a gate creaked open. Figures emerged, ragged but cleaner and better fed than any Silas had seen in months. "Welcome to Zeta," a burly man said gruffly. "I'm Janice, leader of this little band." He eyed Dex warily. "Your bot, is it friendly?" "He's the reason I'm here," Silas said firmly. "We've been through a lot together." Janice grunted, but waved them forward. As the gates closed behind them, Silas felt a knot between his shoulders begin to loosen. Perhaps, against all odds, they had found safe harbor at last. But even as the thought formed, he crushed it down. In this brutal new world, safety was never more than a fleeting illusion. They would rest, gather their strength, and then continue on their desperate quest. Together. The respite at Outpost Zeta was all too brief. Silas and Dex spent hours huddled with Janice and the other survivors, poring over maps and debating strategies. The news of Safe Haven's existence galvanized the weary band, kindling a desperate hope in their hearts. But not all were convinced. Some argued that the journey was too risky, the odds of success too slim. Better to fortify their current position, eking out what meager existence they could in the ruins of the old world. Silas argued passionately, Dex at his side. They had come too far, endured too much, to give up now. And gradually, one by one, the survivors came around. A plan began to take shape, a perilous trek through the wastelands, pooling their resources and skills for one last, desperate gamble. They set out at dawn, a ragged caravan of humans and salvaged vehicles, with Dex leading the way. For days they pressed on, skirting the worst of the devastation, scavenging what supplies they could along the way. But their progress did not go unnoticed. On the fifth day, as they picked their way through the rubble of a shattered highway interchange, the attack came. A horde of marauders, wild-eyed and savage, swarmed over the ruins like a tide of locusts. They fell upon the caravan in a frenzy of violence, wielding clubs and rusted blades, screaming for blood. Silas and the other survivors fought back desperately, but they were outnumbered and outflanked. One by one they fell, overwhelmed by the sheer ferocity of the assault. In the chaos, Silas found himself driven back, separated from the others. A trio of raiders cornered him against a crumbling wall, leering and brandishing their weapons. Silas raised his rifle, but he knew it was hopeless. He was out of ammunition, exhausted, alone. He closed his eyes, waiting for the blows to fall. But they never came. Instead, a familiar voice rang out, calm and clear over the din of battle. "Silas, run." His eyes snapped open. There was Dex, placing itself between Silas and the marauders. Its chassis was battered and scorched, but its optics blazed with resolve. "I will hold them off," the drone said, swiveling to face the attackers. "Get the others. Make for Safe Haven. Go." Silas hesitated, torn. But Dex's voice cracked like a whip. "Go now." Choking back a sob, Silas turned and ran, scrambling over the rubble. Behind him, he heard the roar of Dex's engines, the screams of the marauders, the clash of metal on metal. He did not look back. It took every ounce of Silas' will to keep running, to rally the survivors and drive them onward. His heart ached at the thought of Dex facing those brutes alone, but he knew the drone had made its choice. They ran, and gradually the sounds of battle faded behind them. The ruins gave way to blasted scrubland, and on the horizon, a glint of metal shone like a beacon. Safe Haven. They had made it, but the victory was ashes in Silas' mouth. As the survivors staggered through the bunker's armored doors, he could not help but look back one last time. The wasteland stretched out in all directions, empty and barren. There was no sign of Dex, no hint of the brave little drone that had given everything to ensure their survival. But as Silas turned to follow the others into the shelter of safe haven, he thought he heard, borne on the wind, the faintest echo of a familiar voice. "Hope, Silas. Hope?" And then he was gone, swallowed up by the waiting darkness of the bunker. But that final word echoed in his heart, a tiny spark in the all-consuming gloom. They had made it this far. They would survive. They would remember. And someday, perhaps, they would rebuild. The interior of Safe Haven was a marvel, a testament to the ingenuity and foresight of a world long dead. Vast storerooms hung with row upon row of supplies, enough to sustain a small city for years. Hydroponic bays glowed with the soft light of growing things, promising a steady supply of fresh food. Medical bays hummed with advanced technology, ready to heal the survivors' battered bodies and minds. But for Silas, it all felt hollow. As he watched his fellow survivors explore their new home, exclaiming in wonder and relief, he could not shake the memory of Dex's final sacrifice. The brave little drone had given everything to ensure their survival, and its absence was like a physical ache in his chest. In the days that followed, as the survivors began to settle into a routine, Silas found himself withdrawing, haunting the bunker's long corridors like a ghost. He replayed those final moments over and over in his mind, wondering if there was anything he could have done differently, any way he could have saved his unlikely friend. It was Janice who finally confronted him, cornering him in the hydroponics bay one evening. The burly leader's face was lined with concern as he placed a heavy hand on Silas' shoulder. "I know you're hurting," Janice said gruffly. "We all are. But you can't carry this burden alone. Dex made its choice to give us a chance. Don't let that sacrifice be in vain." Silas blinked back tears, his throat tight. "I know. It's just hard. Dex was more than a machine. It was a friend. The best I ever had." Janice nodded, his eyes distant. "In this world, we take friendship where we can find it. And if a drone can learn to care, to put others before itself, maybe there's hope for us all." That night, Silas found himself in the communications bay, staring at the banks of equipment. On a whim, he powered up the transmitter, watching the dials flicker to life. He cleared his throat, suddenly unsure. But then, haltingly at first, he began to speak. "This is Safe Haven. Calling any survivors. We have shelter, supplies, a chance to start over. If you can hear this, don't give up. There's still hope." He paused, swallowing hard. "And if anyone out there sees a drone, designation DX-217, he's a friend. The best there is. Help him if you can. He deserves everything." Silas set the transmitter to repeat and leaned back, exhausted. He knew it was a long shot, that the odds of anyone hearing his message, let alone finding Dex, were vanishingly small. But he had to try. For the sake of his friend, and for the sake of the spark of hope that still flickered in his chest. Days turned to weeks, and the survivors began to build a new life in the safety of the bunker. They tended the hydroponic gardens, repaired and maintained the equipment, even began to make tentative plans for the future. And every day, Silas made his way to the communications bay, checking for any response to his message. And every day, he was met with silence. Until one morning, a static crackle broke through the white noise, resolving into a voice, faint but unmistakable. "Safe Haven, survivors, coming. Dex." Silas' heart leaped. He lunged for the transmitter, fingers trembling as he adjusted the dials. "This is Safe Haven. We read you. Repeat your message." The voice crackled through again, stronger now. "Safe Haven, we are survivors. We are coming. We have Dex. He is alive." Tears streamed down Silas' face as he slumped back in his chair. Alive. Dex was alive. And he was coming home. Silas thumbed the transmit button, his voice steady for the first time in weeks. Acknowledged. We'll be waiting. Welcome home. He signed off and rose, a new lightness in his step. He had a lot to do, supplies to gather, a celebration to plan. For the first time since the world ended, Silas allowed himself to smile, to believe. They had endured the worst this broken world could throw at them. They had found each other, learned to hope, to trust, to sacrifice. And now, with the promise of reunion on the horizon, Silas knew they could face whatever lay ahead. Together.